I'm Dr. Kelly Brogan. You may know me as a New York Times bestselling author of a book with an exploding pill on the cover, renegade psychiatrist, pole dancer, or honorary member of the Disinformation Dozen. What can I say? I'm a born provocateur. I've spent most of my recent life exposing deceptions, connecting dots, and discovering the secret places my inner victim is still waiting to be liberated. And now I feel called to help you reclaim all of your parts, your health, your sexuality, your power, and your expression, so that you can finally truly own yourself. I want to ignite in you that inner knowing and the pulsing vitality that lives beneath your disempowerment, disconnection, and resentment, so that you can audaciously, courageously, and playfully alchemize your struggle into the specific pleasure of who you are. This is Reclamation Radio. Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I am Dr. Kelly Brogan. And what I love about my containers is that the women I attract always have some audacious questions to ask me. So it's my intention for the musings that I share on these topics to grow the permission field of what's possible, and also to offer relatable reframes that can jailbreak you from your victim stories. So you might notice that I'm a bit more familiar and free when I'm answering these questions in our private spaces. So take a listen. And I hope you'll take the opportunity to submit your questions to me in my membership Vital Life Project. I got this question from Ruth, and she's asking, yesterday at a work event, an acquaintance older in age than me was sitting near me and shared some judgmental remarks about another woman that I don't know. Something like, how can that woman allow herself to wear tight thongs visible through her pants? I found myself nodding in my head, but I also didn't know what was the right action in the moment. Recognizing and holding this woman's shadow as her own, excusing myself from the conversation right away. I would have said something to a friend, but I'm curious to know your thoughts when interacting with people we don't know well. Okay, so obviously a lot of the work that I have supported in the past, couple of years is resolving the sense that we ever know better how somebody else should be living, right? And I think this specifically applies to women. Woman on woman hate, right? And specifically applies to the way that many of us in our feminist programming as women, imagine that the adversary is the misogynist man. And in my experience as a career feminist, that is absolutely not the case. The vitriol, the attack, the admonishment, the energy of no, you cannot be that, in my experience, has come from other women specifically. And honestly, this has been way before I was prancing around a pole in a fucking bikini. This started with my first home birth article in 2016 that I put out. And Jezebel, which is a pharma, at least then was a pharma funded supposed feminist media outlet, unleashed thousands of bots and trolls on my then Facebook page. And it was like including aerial shots of my home and death threats and all the things. And it was like a deluge of women who insisted that I was the ultimate danger to other women. Right. And that's when I saw, wait, hold on a minute. Like, I thought we were all here to fight for women. Right. But a lot of the programming for women is in support of the agenda. I mean, obviously we know that, right? Like, you deserve to take your meds. No one should microaggress your mental illness, right? And so it's been fascinating to watch as somebody who has always imagined that that's one of my core dharmic responsibilities, is to hold this space for women. So I've really seen this. So how do we work with this? If we intend to end the war with men and end the war with women, how do we proceed when we are bearing witness to a woman who is being judged, let's say, for her choices, be they behavioral or otherwise? fashion choices, whatever it is. And I think this is where embodiment is always going to be the answer to activism, right? Because there is a caretaking impulse, right? There is like, a virtuous impulse, like, there's a right thing for me to do here. There is a way that I can come to the rescue. There's a way that I cannot stand by in the courtyard, gazing upon the woman being raped and imagining somebody else, the bystander effect, imagine somebody else is going to handle it, right? So there is such a thing as right action here. What is it? And it's not programmatic. That's the thing. It is determined by you and your body. How do you read that if you don't have a relationship to your body? The feedback that I've been getting is like, I don't know how to talk about what happened. Like, I literally don't have, there's like probably 10 posts that say some version of like, I don't have words for this. And at first I was like, come on, there's gotta be a better testimonial than that, until I realized, this is what happens when women are in their bodies. They don't have narrative, right? Like, obviously I'm the space holder. That's always going to be part of what I deliver. However, a woman in her body doesn't necessarily have the punchy thing to say, doesn't have the clever summary, and may not, especially in that moment, if she is picking up, some of the, this is an offense to all humans, right? Like, kind of a thing. You might freeze, right? You might even fawn, right? You might even find yourself agreeing when in your core, this is like a violation to participate in. So the answer is not necessarily to plan ahead what you would do. The answer is to meet your body where you're at. Meet your body where you're at. If you are in a freeze, you're going to go ahead and you're going to stay quiet and you're going to make that okay. And if you are in a fawn and you do a regrettable thing or you say a regrettable thing, you're going to relate to the part that has always known that was a decent strategy, right? And you're going to not try to convert that part into seeing how bad and wrong it is, right? And if you get all nasty and you get in your fight, right? Or you run out the room in your flight, that's where you're at. I'll tell a quick example. I was at Music and Sky and there was a presentation, and it was extraordinarily triggering for me, this presentation, and the specific way that the presenter seemed to like single me out with eye contact in the audience and make proclamations about like flat earth, round earth stuff. And I went through my whole like somatic sequence, like literally like flushes of heat up my throat. My heart was like pounding. And I stayed, it was, if you've been to Music and Sky, it was like in this little room. And I was like probably third row, right? So it would have been a whole fucking thing for me to get up and go out, leave, right? And so I stayed and I was like, this is a spiritual somatic practice for me. And I'm going to breathe through this and I'm going to use all of my tools. I'm going to track the sensation, right? So I did all that stuff. And then I like left the room and I talked to my coach about it later, and she said, what you did in that moment was to reject the part of you that needed to leave in favor of the spiritual warrior part. Right. And so she suggested something that just made so much sense to me, which is what I'm telling you now, which is that there is a window of time where meeting yourself where you are is showing your body that you can be trusted, not to override the system in service of like whatever it is that your mind thinks is the right thing to do. So if I were to meet my body where I was, I needed to leave the room. Didn't feel good to be there anymore, right? I didn't have the ready self-containment at that moment, at that time, to feel comfortable and to offer myself rapid alchemy of whatever was happening inside. I wanted to leave. So meeting myself where I was, showing myself that I could be trusted, right, would be listening to what I needed in that moment. And I would have gotten up and left. And then I would have held the part of me that said, oh my God, that's so rude. Can't believe you did that. Right. But instead, right, I held the part of me that wanted to leave. And that part had a much, much stronger charge to metabolize. So letting it be okay, letting your stress physiology be okay, right, is an important phase, if you will. Maybe it never ends. I don't know. And then as you find yourself again, right, like as you come back into regulation, that's when you might find that declaring your I am feels healing, feels important to you. Telling somebody who thinks they know how this woman, how they should man, right, is not the antidote, right? Like, you did the wrong thing. How dare you say that about it? You don't even know about, what women's lib really looks like right now. It looks like sexual expression, right? Or whatever the fuck. That is becoming the monster we're fighting. Maybe it's exactly what needs to be happening. Maybe this woman needs to hear that feedback. Do you know how much I have grown from and integrated from hearing people's shitty, critical feedback? It's been the most powerful spiritual practice of my life. Okay, so you don't know what that woman needs. You know how these people should be acting. You only know your felt experience. And sharing your felt experience, it felt blank when you blank, might be really amazing for you, especially if you're someone who doesn't run their mouth like I do, right? If you're someone who's more seized up, it might feel like an important opportunity to titrate into, hey, I'm in the room too, right? Which you may not have a lot of experience with from your childhood. And so you might go and sit with it and send an email or come back and tap the guy on the shoulder and be like, hey, like, I imagine you meant, no harm and you were just making an innocent comment, but it felt like really bad for me when you said that about her. That's it. Drop it like it's hot. Right? Just offer that there. Or I like to work with ready phrases, right? Like, so, or you could have a ready phrase if it feels like, let's say you work in an environment where these things come up often, you might have something in your pocket so that when you're in freeze, if you have something to say. So Kasia Urbaniak, who is, I've shared her work a lot, big fan, and she wrote a book called Unbound. And she teaches that the way you break the freeze is to ask a question. And so you might say, like, do you always talk about coworkers' underwear in the office? Right? It could be related, or she says it doesn't even have to be related. Like, hey, anybody know what time lunch is? Because when you ask the question, you're in the dominant pole again, and you get out of that prey energy, get out of that submissive energy where you can't access your faculties and you can't make decisions and you can't possibly know what is right action from that place. Right. So, that's a little strategy. You could lock and load. And it's also completely perfect if it takes you time to figure out how to represent yourself in these kinds of dynamics. And if you need to get up and leave, that's exactly what you're going to do. Also on the topic of judgment, Anna asked, I would love to hear your thoughts about what we get out of judging others, especially when it's total strangers we don't even know. I've been looking at this in myself and asking, what am I getting out of this? I still have no answer. I don't share my judgment with anyone, but I'm still thinking it. Okay, so you are describing a scenario that's very different than my adaptive situation. So mine is like, I feel judged, right? And when that lands, meaning it triggers me, I will raise my sword, right? And so like what I've noted uncomfortably is that in that sword is it's the mirror reflection. That's the metaphor. It's like I can see myself, and the way that I am then judging back is exactly the same as what I am judging somebody else for, right? So if I say, I can't believe how much you lack nuance, right? In that moment, I am lacking nuance, probably, right? So we enact exactly that which we judge when we judge. So the rubric I like to invoke for this is like the villain crown stuff, right? There is the experience of being judged, right? And so when you are, which is not what you're asking about, but I'm just going to include this. When you are being judged, you have this opportunity to try it on, right? To wear that villain crown and just allow somebody else to think that you are bad and wrong. And when you do that, you can assess whether or not it fits. So I was kicked out of a group recently for their bylaw. What is it called? Like bylaws, their community, like sort of whatever's, included that members were in some way not able to express themselves immodestly, profanely, or promiscuously or something like that. And so apparently I violated that, just, I don't know, like with my public brand and whatever. And this was like hugely triggering for me on many levels, because I'm used to being judged for my like scientific and intellectual perspectives. And I'm new to being judged for the way that I comport myself as a woman, and publicly anyway. So when I tried that on, I tried on the immodesty, and I was like, yeah, kind of fits, right? I mean, look at what I'm wearing now, like a skin tight crop top. Okay. So like, that's arguable if we're going to like default to the conventional social definitions. The profanity. Yeah. I have like an absolute like trucker mouth, and I grew up in New Jersey. It's just kind of in the water there. I don't know. And I haven't really, expressed so much of that publicly until recently as I integrate this, right? And just sort of play with like, will I experience like terminal cancellation if I am actually who I am, right? The promiscuity thing, I was like, that doesn't fit, right? Like that's just not accurate, right? And so that just kind of like slid off. So there I have this opportunity to really like see and then make a choice and assess my choices with a sober mind and a clear heart, right? So when we judge others, and I argue this is like a very adaptive thing for us to do. It's part of our assessment. And the only difference between, of reality, and the only difference between judgment and discernment is that with discernment, you retain your power of choice, and you do not need somebody to be bad and wrong. So you don't need to be the litigator and get up on your damn podium and make sure that you educate the ignorant person about how bad and wrong they are so that you can make your choice. But you're describing, that you don't even raise your sword aloft. You're just in this state of being like, ooh, why is she, I don't know what you're really in a state of doing, but like, let's say like, oh, why is she wearing that? Or like, I can't believe she keeps touching her hair like that. Or like, why is he like walking on my lawn or whatever it is, right? Like in those judgments, there's a lot of gold because you are interacting with someone who's holding a part of you. And like the more sensation you have about the judgment, like the more that part is like just like ripe for reclamation, right? So usually these judgments of others like fall into two categories, but I'm sure there's infinite categories. But let's say one of them is some way of being that you do not feel you have permission to be because of the rules you were raised in, right? So like I have a long history of judging women that I experience as being like easily overwhelmed and like incapable of managing their lives and like basically like incompetent. Okay, so those are all masculine qualities, interestingly, right? So those women, right, like whose lives are just like a shit show, and they're like kept women by their, the alimony from their ex or whatever, and they're just sitting there not doing anything and just overwhelmed, right? So I would feel judgmental of women who can't get their shit together, because the way that I was raised, that is not allowed. And you lose love, right? For being, I would say, particularly from my father, but I would lose love for being like incapable or like slow or stupid or whatever the things, right? So, and I got love when I performed in this like predictable, achievement oriented way, productivity oriented way, right? So I don't have permission to be that woman. And guess what? I bet I would like to know what it's like to be that woman who's just like, fuck it all, right? Like who's just sort of like, I'm going to live on the dole and I'm going to sit here and smoke cigarettes and watch TV and drink and then complain about it. There's absolutely a part of me that is curious about like what it would be like to have the permission to inhabit that archetype. So it's either something you don't feel you have permission to be. And the more restrictive our permission field is, the more we are going to be in this dance, right? So I might judge a woman who has an OnlyFans account or something like that and is making her money off of like pictures of her feet or whatever. And the more that bothers me, the more it's possible that it's a taboo. It's holding erotic tension with me because I want to be that bad. I want to. And only until I am that bad will I actually reclaim that erotic energy like back into my actual lived life, right? Or this person represents a part of you that you already are. And you're in like this almost like denial, right? So you stuff that part in the shadow, right? So like when I lived in New York and practiced as a psychiatrist, I was never late, never late. First of all, I would charge by the minute overage of the 45-minute session. And I would start right to the minute and I would show up everywhere on time and I was just never late. But that's probably not true, right? And so when I was late, I would have a really good excuse and it would be circumstantial and it wouldn't confer any like implications about my character, right? When I moved to Miami, everyone, well, of course, not always so absolute, but most people like take a lot of liberties with like punctuality here. Okay. And I remember over and over and over again, whether it was like the pool guy or my girlfriend for dinner, just witnessing people like show up when they like island time, right? Like show up when they feel like it. And these days I have embraced that I'm actually like usually late to things. So I was already the person who was late. I was just like projecting and judging that person I already was in somebody else. Like, right. If I was like bothered by somebody who was late when I was up in New York, it's because I was projecting this dimension of myself I was unwilling to see is already here. So there's a lot of room with this experience of judgment to basically ask like, how am I this person? Or how do I want to be this person? What if I secretly want to be this person? And that really flips it on its head because no longer is it about how you're good and they're bad, how you get it and they don't, and how imperative it is on some level that they get it so that you feel more comfortable in the world and they're not reminding you of the you that didn't get it before, that you are yourself actually judging still and in rejection of. So to circle back around to the rejection theme, how is it that we can take the opportunity when we are judging ourselves or somebody else to interact with whatever it is that we imagine we're judging with more lightness, more curiosity, more softness just inside yourself, and play with the possibility that we can't actually be so sure that we figured it out, that we know the thing that is wrong and bad to be and the thing that is right to be, whether we are on that side of the fence or this one. So, I like to keep it pretty simple and to remember that whenever it is, I imagine I'm in a position to educate somebody about how ignorant they are, about how they're wrong, that my shadow is operative, and I do it. I still do it. And I have compassion for why I do it. And it makes sense that I do it. And if I can really begin to feel into that little invitation, right? That little part that's like, hey, there's something here for you, right? It's me. That ultimately I will be far more able to bring the lightness of a little smile to those moments where I feel the devastation of rejection or the disappointment and resentment of rejecting somebody else. And finally, here's a question from Carla, which I can definitely relate to. I have two parts at war. One wants me to be more public with my work for my own expansion and abundance, and another feels like it will die from exposure. So, to stay safe, I spin in confusion, indecisiveness, and inaction, which turns into a profound depression, the ultimate defense. I've seen an internal family systems therapist for 6 months with no real movement. The more I hide, the bigger this monster becomes. How would you handle this? Okay. First of all, I relate to this very intimately, and I bet a lot of people do. This is why, I don't know. Let me reread if this is about, public work. Okay. So this is why business is such a, maybe it's not business that you're talking about, but I'll just say business is such a fundamentally spiritual practice because we have an opportunity to work specifically with our relationship to feeling seen, right? So most would describe love, an experience of being loved, as feeling seen and heard and understood. So in the modern moment of Big Brother AI, there's like nowhere to hide. Don't even pretend that there's anywhere to hide. So how are you going to relate to exposing yourself and being, out there in the public eye? A lot of what I've worked on with my coach is the spectrum from invisibility, which feels terrible, right? Because we feel unseen, unheard, not understood, alone, right? That we don't belong, all the things. From invisibility all the way to fame, right? To like full on attention. And I actually shared this in Inner Circle recently, the small group container that I run, that there is this photo I saw in a gallery maybe last year, and it's a woman, gorgeous woman. I think she's smoking a cigarette. It's like a 1950s style thing. And she's like smoking a cigarette and reading a newspaper, and she's sitting on a beach chair, and she's surrounded by like 50 men, right? Who are all on beach chairs next to her, and they're all like staring at her, like hungry energy, right? And when I saw that, I was like imagining how if I were that woman, I would like implode, right? Like I absolutely could not handle that. I don't have the system capacity to handle attention like that. And you might think like, oh, well, of course I have this capacity. I have a public platform, right? But there's a reason I believe, semi-consciously kept my notoriety or fame at like a certain level my whole career, right? And it's part of whatever my capacity is to hold that, right? So if I was that woman surrounded by all those men, I would feel responsible for them and their experience of me, right? Which would be really unpleasant and invoke a trauma field of like, all of my stuff, right? So we only ever, as you well know, have the amount of attention that we can handle. And on the other side is, right, the cloak keeper, if you will, right? Like the part you called it, the hiding part, right? And hiding is a very effective strategy. It's very effective, right? So it's like, you don't even really have to be in intimate conversation with the hiding part to know why it works, right? If you're not putting yourself out there, you don't have to experience all of those parts that you don't want to know, right? So when we are in full attention, we not only open ourselves up to judgment from others. But we also open ourselves and our caretaker, like I said, up to the experience of managing others' experiences of us. So all of these parts that are really taxing come online. And if you don't actually want to know that part and those parts, then you're not going to take steps in that direction. And the protector that is the hider is safer, like you said, like it just feels more neutral. Parts work is amazing to me because when it is true to its intention of there being no bad parts, it is the resolution of inner fragmentation. However, I imagine that there are many practitioners, and again, I know almost none. There are many practitioners who are so conditioned themselves that they subtly create a field with you where there is a problem part. Like if the hiding part is not talking, it's because there's a part in front of the hiding part, right? So like a mother who is judging one of her kids, like when we are imagining that one part is a problematic part, we're already not in the self, because the self with a capital S is like, I'm here for all of it, right? I love all of you. Right? I'm committed, I'm present, I'm attending, I'm compassionate, like I'm here for all of you. And I'm going to organize like who gets time, when, and I am actually the one who's making the decisions. So share away, right? So if that is not occurring, it's because there's still another part that has not come into your awareness, right? So if that awareness is the offering that is being provided to all of these different parts, the experience of belonging, the experience of being welcome is the result, right? So growing your capacity for attention is a practice. There are many ways to, what's called in somatic experiencing, like titrate into it. Like I remember one of the exercises that I did was I wore more, I don't know, the word that's coming to me is provocative, but like, I don't even remember honestly what I wore, but like, let's say I wore like a crop top and loud leggings or something like that to the gun range, right? To like practice shooting. And so there's like usually a lot of men there, and I would have the experience of like drawing attention to myself instead of going in like black sweatpants and like a sweatshirt. Right. So just for example, like, and you would want to find like small instances in your lived experience where you can bring a little bit of attention to yourself and just breathe through the experience, right? And then be with the parts that come up, because they all deserve to be there and they all have very good reasons for being there. So the titration into attention, honestly, I find one of the most powerful crucibles to be social media. I was off social media, as many of you know, for like over a year in the early pandemic days. And that was good. That was great. Actually, it felt good, other than for like business posting. Like I didn't have like a personal relationship to Instagram or whatever for that time period. And about a year and a half ago, I started to work with it as like literally a higher order spiritual practice. And it has grown me immensely, because when there is commentary, which inevitably there is, that is critical or judgmental, and it bothers me, I'll find the part of me that agrees. And I'll only do this as much as feels comfortable in a day, quote unquote, comfortable in a day, right? So like there will be days where I have no idea what my haters are saying. And then there will be days where I ritualistically will sit down and feel what comes up in my body, like as I read these different things. And I'll usually pick one thing that is particularly triggering. Like, for example, somebody made a comment about my nails. And I've grown my nail. I had a dream, maybe 6 months ago, and I decided for the first time in my life to grow and paint my nails. I've never done that. Literally, as a little girl, nothing, never. And I love them. It's so delightful for me. I like look at my hands. I'm like so pretty all day long. And since I started pole dancing, like I can't wear any of the rings that I wore. Like they've almost like become like manly in a way. So I was like in this kink with my own hands. And now I've like turned them into something I love to look at. Okay. So somebody was like shit talking my nails. They're like, oh, like I'm going to listen to somebody with like, you know, metallic press-on nails or something. I was like, bitch, those are first of all real and second of all beautiful, right? So like I got all triggered, and I was able to meet that part of me that is like still in judgment that I am doing this, right? Like, it's like, I can't just like have the nails. Like I need to tell all of you that I didn't have them before and now I have them and they feel good, right? So it's alive in there, right? So even that, right? So I meet this part that is still saying, oh, you're so superficial. Like, pick a lane. Like, what kind of a woman are you? Like this kind or that, right? So I'm still in that. And I still have the opportunity to develop deeper intimacy with the part of me that thinks it's a problem that I have the nails looking how I do. Okay. So all of that whole long story is just to say, post something, make a ritual out of sitting down, light a freaking candle, and read the comments and see what comes up in you. And every single time a comment bothers you, you're meeting a part. Of course, every single time you love a comment, you know, you're also meeting a part. But the work is usually in developing intimacy with the part of you that agrees with your critics. It's very deep. And I think that's, you know, one of the more powerful ways to begin to expand your capacity to hold, you know, attention, eyes on you. So people love to ask me questions, and I love to ask questions of others because inquiry is play. But some of my interviews and answers are too hot to handle for Reclamation Radio. So in my membership, Vital Life Project, I have created a private podcast that gets delivered to wherever you listen to podcasts, where I answer your questions that arise because of my provocative subject matter. And I also share interviews that might otherwise be censored that I call the Sovereignty Series. So you'll get access to these private podcasts and a private chat by joining my membership, Vital Life Project. I'll see you in there.